Now let's get into the true import of the day, and that is the Epiphany. A few things I want to mention before we get off into our artist and this image. First of all, this is the day of the king cake. And so in tradition, what happens is there is a hidden figurine of the Christ child. Whoever gets the Christ child figurine wins whatever prize there may be there. The origin of the cake tradition is believed to be related all the way back to Roman times of festival. And in the Middle Ages, it was said that the king who was chosen, and so whoever got the figure was king of the day, would pay the assembly a great round of drinks or favors. And the Spanish and French settlers brought it to America. It includes a figurine. It is believed to the individual who discovers it will have a good fortune. And in many locales, this pastry, this pan dulce, this sweet bread, this Three Kings cake is a feature up until Ash Wednesday. That's some of the tradition of the king cake. So hopefully today you will have the opportunity to have a king cake. The next thing that I want to bring up is when the wise men arrived to pay homage to the Christ child, and it is also the day of the traditional Epiphany blessing. Hopefully you took the opportunity to prepare with the information yesterday. Again, the blessing of the chalk, the blessing of the Epiphany threshold, all of that is on PDF that you can request from Kate. And the point that I want to make is that this was unbroken tradition, not something new. Modernly, what's happening is tradition, and the integrity of tradition is being militated against. And so this is one of the features of Reclamation Theology, is we know their names from of old, from the very first. And these were real men. The relics of the Magi are in the cathedral in Cologne, Germany. This is not some made-up fairy tale. This happened. Epiphany celebrates, in part, the primitive or first pilgrimage to Jesus, the first coming to Jesus, in response to Jesus's journey to us in the incarnation. Both of these are pilgrimages of love. The wise men, traditionally named Melchior, Balthazar, and Caspar, serve as a wonderful model for all of those who are still seeking Jesus and offering him their gifts. And so as we go through these, it's important to link their offerings of gold, frankincense, and myrrh to the three gifts that we can offer Jesus ourselves. Traditionally, these wise men represented the three ages of man. One was a young man, one was a middle-aged man, and one was an old man. And our artist captures that, more about him in a moment. But Melchior, he's remembered as the bearer of gold. It was a treasure of great value even today. And how fortunate it would have been for this to be bestowed upon this holy family at this point. What gift could we offer Jesus that would rival gold? In a word, it's his word. It's to give back to him that which he has given us. And like the incarnation, it's God's first gift to us, and we give it back to him by receiving it. And so the gold, always that which is the most precious. That which is the most precious to us is our time. No matter how rich or poor a man is, his most precious thing is his life, his time. To be 100% present to others out of charity. This is that which is of the greatest value. According to Benedict XVI, and this was from one of his homilies, Lectio Divina is the singular spiritual practice that can usher in the once-in-a-generation renewal that the body of Christ so desperately needs. And he says on the anniversary of Dei Verbum, I am convinced if this practice is effectively promoted and enthusiastically embraced, it will bring a new spiritual springtime. If we can give back to God just a portion of our day, just a moment to consider his word, to let ourselves become a monstrance to reflect that. Now, Melchior traditionally was the oldest of the wise men. And so the gold, his time, would represent even something more precious because he had less of it than the other two. And so to take this big chunk out of his life, his time, his influence, to go to a country where he was not known, to leave his sphere of influence, and to take this pilgrimage as an old man to come and to see the Christ and to bring him the gold. Now, frankincense, this was the gift presented by Balthazar. It was the main ingredient for incense. And so Balthazar is the youngest. He is the one who is enamored. He is in the act of adoration. Frankincense is made from a dried resin drawn from craggy trees in the Sinai and on the Arabian Peninsula. It has the smell of worship, an appropriate gift for adoring the Christ. It is used in the book of Revelation to represent our prayers ascending to God. And it's this understanding that there can be no worship without sacrifice. All worship is predicated upon sacrifice. And completes, or this perfects, this expression of the liturgical event of the Eucharist as this wonderful oblation, reminiscent of Holocaust-type sacrifice, is sent upward to God, and our prayers rise on that. A soul at the funeral of Mass will rise on this incense to the throne of God. If we consider incorporating Lectio Divina, that giving back that word, that goal, that monstrance, and then be cognizant of our prayers rising up to Christ. That's Balthazar. Now, Caspar is the middle-aged man. Finally, Caspar unwraps his gifts of myrrh for Christ and his mother. And myrrh was used along with other spices for preparing the bodies of the dead. And this may be a foreshadowing of death, of course. But the point being is this brings us back to the centrality of death, the centrality of sacrifice, finality, if you will, of our earthly existence, and then the beginning of our heavenly existence, our birth into everlasting life. And there was an unfinished homily of St. John Paul II that he had composed. It was found at his death. And within that, he makes the point to humanity, which sometimes seems bewildered and overwhelmed by the power of evil, selfishness, fear, imminent death. The risen Lord offers his love that pardons, reconciles, and reopens hearts to hope. It is a love that converts hearts and gives peace. How much the world needs to understand and accept divine mercy. And it's this understanding that resurrection does not happen without the tomb. And I think that myrrh speaks to this understanding that death precedes life. Death precedes everlasting life. Death is the end of this life, but the beginning of the next. And so that's the gift of the three wise men and who they are associated with. So Melchior, the gold; Balthazar, the incense; Caspar, the myrrh. Caspar, the middle-aged man who sees his youth when he looks to the left. He sees his age when he looks to the right, his birth when he looks to the left, his death when he looks to the right. He has that middle-aged perspective. Balthazar, the wonder of incense and worship. It is he who is wrapped in adoration. Let's go to our picture of the Magi. This particular image I chose is by Peter Paul Rubens, and we'll talk a little bit more about Rubens, but it captures the three wise men. And so we see Balthazar in the act of incense. You see him with the thurible in his hand, about to offer incense to the Christ child. You see him in the white and the purity, and he has the youngest countenance of all of the wise men. Behind him, Melchior with somewhat a pensive look, if nothing else. And then Caspar in the green, immediately behind Balthazar, the middle-aged man, and he's looking at him full of wonder but skeptical. He's got a distance. And Balthazar, offering the incense, is the closest in rapt attention and his gaze locked upon that of the Christ child. I have pondered this image, consciously or not consciously, for 60 years. This image is tapestry by Rubens. It was a tapestry, a replica of it hung in our house. It now hangs in my son's house. But it was part of our holiday accoutrement, decoration, if you will, and it hung by the dining room table. And it hung there seasonally, so it wasn't there all the time so that one became numb to it. But I was fascinated with the capturing of Rubens of the various looks that everyone was giving the Christ child, and the wise men, their ages, what they brought, and how the presence of the Christ child was affecting them. So this is why I chose this image. Let's talk just a bit about this artist, because God speaks to us through people, through art. Very poignantly does he speak to us through art. So who was Peter Paul Rubens? A great story. He's one of the greatest purveyors of sacred art. He was born post-Reformation, but there was a lot of persecution going on. His father was a cad. His father was a pompadour. His father was a paramour. His father was a philanderer, and he was a Calvinist, and his mother was Catholic. But he had the distinction of being noble, very much of means. He has the distinction of being a knight. He is Sir Peter Paul Rubens, and he was knighted in Spain, in England, and in Germany. He also held a duchy in France. It was because he was commissioned to do historical and religious paintings, and he was very prolific. And so what he would do, mass art was a concept. He did so many altar pieces, so many monastery paintings, and it became quite fashionable for the dukes, the barons, the kings to commission him to do an altar piece for monasteries, for convents that they were supporting, and they would be figured in the historical documents. So, for instance, one very famous one is the Our Lady of Mount Carmel and the promulgation of the brown scapular to Simon Stock. This was commissioned by a duchess of France, and she stands at Simon Stock's left hand in a Carmelite habit. And this was very indicative of his style and what he did. He also would mass produce paintings. He would paint the faces and the hands, and other artists apprenticed and others would do all of the rest of the work. So he would paint these particular features, and then they would fill in everything else. He also was very instrumental in promulgating the Rubenesque caricature. I hate to use the word caricature, but women, fleshy, fertile women, strong, muscular men, all in the contortion of movement. He very much influenced art that would come after. And he had some archetypes. And so the male archetypes were the hero, the husband, the father, the civic leader, the king, and the battle weary. And so what would happen is he would paint this particular archetype and then change the facial features to be a certain duke or to be a certain real character. His women included stock characters, the female archetypes like the virgin, the consort, the wife, the widow, the diplomatic regent. And so all of these then would be they were very recognizable by their body language, their appearance, etc. And then he would change the face and hands to a specificity so that they could be identified, mostly by themselves and others within the court. One of the things that he did with regard to painting is had certain themes. For instance, this adoration of the Magi is one of 16 different adoration pictures. He had adoration of shepherds, adoration of angels, adorations of Magi, large crowd scenes. This was a very popular theme, this and the Passion. He would also do ingenious things with altar pieces, such as triptychs, back pieces, reredos that would expand, or a panel would slide away to reveal another image on a particular feast day. Truly an amazing son of the church and contributor to great art, and the amount that he produced was phenomenal for him to have lived and died in 62 short years. So Peter Paul Rubens, the latest work that he did that sold, we used it as Massacre of the Innocents, and it recently sold for $76.2 million at Sotheby's. This was and still is the highest price for an old master painting. This is a tribute to Peter Paul Rubens and an image that I grew up with and now grow old with, and to him I am thankful. On this day of the Epiphany, take a moment on this first Saturday. Meet the requirements for the first Saturday. Give honor to our Blessed Mother. Adore her Son. If you get the opportunity, please take a moment to see him in adoration and have the thoughts of Melchior, who provides the monstrance, Balthazar, who provides the incense, and Caspar, who provides the constant reminder that if we are to live with Christ in the hereafter, we must die with him to ourselves, die with him to this world. Blessed Epiphany.